IVM.
Welcome to The Origin of Things. Episode 43. One unlikely invention and another very heavy one. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 in Japan had, as most such tragedies do, quite the aftermath. Over 100,000 people died, there was civil unrest, and the reconstruction of Tokyo. There were probably many undocumented stories as well of lives uprooted or just changed. One story that was documented was that of Tadao, a young man who was born in Kochi. No, not the South Indian tropical paradise, which is my hometown, but the prefecture in Japan. Tadao was forced to move to Tokyo because of the earthquake, but once he got there, he got the opportunity to work with his uncle as a lathe operator. A lathe, for those not blessed with an engineering degree, is a machine tool that rotates on its axis very quickly so that it can shape or cut something. Tadao proved adept at the lathe and a bunch of other things and soon gained quite a reputation for himself, eventually setting up a business as a subcontractor to make parts. He did well, but he had to work very hard for it, even by Japanese standards, I guess. For his younger brother, Toshio, who wondered if he could even help his brother in some way. Toshio was not a latesman, he was more of an electrical guy. He fancied himself as an inventor. His idol was Thomas Edison. He put his inventiveness to work at the Ministry of Telecommunications, but the maximum he could achieve there was systems improvement. Yawn. Toshio knew he was made for bigger things, so he quit his job and joined his hard-working brother with the aim of inventing something. He tried many ideas, but his first commercially successful one, indeed the company's first commercially successful one, sold under its own name, was an immensely Japanese invention, a cigarette holder that you wore as a ring. This was a hit because in post-war Japan, commodities were scarce and people would smoke the cigarettes all the way down. It was a hit. The Yubiwa, as it was called, gave the company enough profits to try something more ambitious than a better way to voluntarily ingest poisonous fumes. It was while scouring around for new ideas that the brothers went to a business show in Tokyo, seeing many of the West's inventions and innovations for the first time. With the post-war boom and the formalization of the office, there were a fair number of weird items doing the rounds. Some of these products would be more in place at a museum today rather than a boardroom. Some of them even had levers and shafts. Toshio saw an opportunity here. He was, after all, an electrician at heart, and while sure he did make some cash helping the Japanese snuff minutes of their lives with a piece of jewelry, he knew he was made for better, smarter things. Tinkering with a little bit of electromagnets, working day and night with his brother, till finally he managed to make a working prototype of something. Excitedly, the brothers took it to a massive trading company that dealt in office supplies, only to be told that their product, while definitely better than what was there in the market size and operations-wise, was out of date functionally. Toshio and Tadao could have been disappointed and scrapped all their plans and go back to making more inventions to help a generation of Japanese improve their chances of contracting lung cancer. But no, they were made of sterner stuff. They hunkered down to make their invention better, solve the problems, and this time their two other brothers, yes, there were 4 in all, joined in. Finally, after years of development, they finally had their product. A product prototype that weighed a mere 140 kilograms and was 70 centimeters high and a whole meter across, costing close to 500,000 yen, or over 3 lakh Indian rupees back in the late 1950s. So our brothers were all excited, ready to get their machine onto a plane to take it to a trade show to unveil, but they were not allowed to board. Why? Their machine apparently exceeded the allowable size. After much fighting with the airline, they carefully had to disassemble a machine not meant to be disassembled, and as they feared, when they tried to put it back after landing, it did not work. All that effort in all those years foiled by airline policy. Dejected but not willing to give up, they carried through the event using slides. Because as any MBA will tell you, if you don't have actual substance, you can use PowerPoint. The 4 came back to Tokyo defeated. But wait, what was that? A visit from a representative of Uchida Yoko, one of Japan's biggest office suppliers? who was told by an attendee of the trade show to investigate the product, who was impressed enough to sign on the brothers and their invention to a contract with Uchida Yoko as the exclusive distributor. Wow! And that was history. The 140-kilogram device made it to hundreds of offices around the world and its successors to millions around the world. There was no looking back for Toshio, Tadao and their brothers as their company went from invention to invention, innovation to innovation, pioneering entire product lines along the way, including office productivity, timekeeping, and even music. And in fact is synonymous with many of those verticals. Today, of course, they are best known for their electronic products, like so many companies in Japan that started out without a semiconductor in sight. But the sheer range is still staggering, something we might forget today even as the brand is a household name. For example, this company was the first one to release a digital camera with an LCD, or the first cell phone with a 3.2 MP camera, or a wristwatch that displayed text on glass, such a Japanese invention. A wristwatch with a digital compass in 1993, a pocket-sized LCD TV in 1992, a guitar with built-in synthesized sounds, and a few decades before that, the world's first personal calculator, and 15 years before that, the 14A, that 140-kilogram office calculator that revolutionized things in the office. For you no longer needed to crank out an answer, you could just press a few buttons. Mind blown. As regular listeners of The Origin of Things know, I am often fascinated by butterfly effects. A random accident or chance occurrence somewhere led to an industry-defining brand a few years later. Who knows what would have happened if someone didn't meet someone or get inspired by the right thing, or one fateful day when everything conspired? Who knows what wouldn't have happened if post-war Japan didn't love cigarettes so much? And regular listeners of the show will also know my fascination to see what led to what and how the products of well-known companies ended up being nothing like what they sold first. Just like our example here. You wouldn't think an electronics conglomerate would have been born out of all things a ring to hold cigarettes. Of course, it's not just serendipity and butterfly effect, it's also hard work, tenacity, and sheer inventiveness. In this case, the hard work, tenacity, and sheer inventiveness of Toshio, Tadao, Kazuo, and Yukio, the brothers whose surname would eventually become a byword for watches and musical keyboards, the surname of Kashio, or as the rest of the world knows it, Casio. See you next week with another edition of The Origin of Things. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us and all our shows on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, that's Chuck_Gopal on Twitter and Chuck of All Trades on Instagram. All links in the show notes of this episode. See you next week.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, Storytel and the Whole Truth Foods. Thank you for supporting us. So a great bunch of episodes this week. First, let me tell you about The Note with Maruk Inayat. It was featuring Asaduddin Owaisi. She spoke to the AIMIM leader to understand what the Indian Muslim voter wants and how his party is any different from the BJP. On Advertising is Dead, Varun spoke with Malika Sadani. Malika is the founder and CEO of the Moms Company. They discussed the science of motherhood. On Naan Curry with Sadaf and Archit, Dhananjay Chuck of the Edges and Sledges podcast showed up, so we did another crossover, this time with food and cricket. On Agla Station Adulthood, Ritasha and Ayushi talked to Gaurang Sangvi, head of digital business at DSP Mutual Fund. The episode has some logical and realistic advice, especially for millennials, on how to invest their money. Shunya One is back this week with Sheila Aditya and myself. We spoke to Anirudh Singla of Pepper Content this week. Really interesting conversation. Anirudh gave us some real deep insights into content creation and how they're thinking about different ways of creating it. Do check them out. Really fun show, really fun conversation. And with that, we hope to see you again next week.
Feeling overwhelmed, anxious, struggling with too many obstacles, don't know where your life is headed? Well, if you are dealing with one or all of these, tune into the Positively Unlimited podcast, because in each episode, I share a life lesson, a life hack, a pro tip that can help you get your life back on track. All episodes are available on the IVM website, IVM Podcast app, or wherever it is that you get your podcast from.